Welcome to the ID10T podcast number 1132. The date of the posting of this podcast is August 23rd, 2021, and Talking Dead is back live in our studio, on our set, with an audience. It's very exciting. This is how the show should be. It's been a blast, and we'll be on following Walking Dead for the next 2 months for this part of season 11. Then we'll take a break. Then we'll be back next year. Also, that's Sunday nights, and Monday nights, The Wall is on NBC. So, and I believe the same time for both, 10, 9 Central. So 10, 9 Central for Talking Dead Sunday, 10, 9 Central for The Wall Monday on NBC. So that's it. That's my self-promo. But let's talk about you. Let's talk about you promo, the ID10T community, events at ID10T.com. Like Michael, who writes, I want to give a shout out to a cool weekly event in my part of LA, North Hollywood. Every Sunday from 3 to 9 p.m. is the Vegan Exchange LA event. It's a ton of vegan food trucks and booths and more. It's free and it's family friendly. More info can be found on their Instagram account, Vegan Exchange LA. Thank you for sharing, Michael. See, Michael wrote events at ID10T.com just like you can to share the thing that you want to promote. Either that you made or that you like or your friend made or something that you thought would be fun or interesting or intriguing to the ID10T community. So thank you for sharing, Michael, and everyone else, share. This episode is Andrew Rannells, who is a phenomenal actor and also super funny and really nice. Andrew got his start literally on like the biggest Broadway shows imaginable. Andrew was in Book of Mormon, Hairspray, Jersey Boys, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, Hamilton, and also has a ton of really fantastic, brilliant comedy TV credits like Comedy Bang Bang, How I Met Your Mother, Glee, Girls, The Nick, Another Period, Drunk History, Will and Grace. Currently, Andrew is on Black Monday, which is on Showtime, and also on Amazon's Modern Love, which comes back August 13th. And Andrew actually directed one of the episodes, which I believe is airing a little later in the season. It's in the episode's entitled How Do You Remember Me? But Andrew and I have actually never met, but we have really close circles of work and friends. And so this was like a real absolute pleasure to get to meet Andrew on the podcast, obviously via Zoom. We're just doing Zoom casts right now, but it was great to say hi. And, you know, Andrew just has a very inspiring career because he does literally so many great stage and film and television, and now is directing. And I don't know, I'm interested in directing. My brain just kind of keeps going back to that. It's really, could I do that? Should I do that? I don't know. And so I really love to pick the brains of people who are not only directors, but also people who've just started directing as well to kind of find out what their experience has been. But this was such a wonderful chat, and Andrew is just the best. So I hope you enjoy the ID10T podcast episode number 1132 with Andrew Rannells as we roll the thing.
Initiating ID10T protocol.
Hello.
Hey there.
How's it going?
It's going well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I was going to hook up a fancy new microphone, and it's not USB-C. Ba, 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 ba.
Damn it. I know they keep changing those things, and then what the hell are you supposed to do?
Nothing. I guess just record, like an amateur podcaster with just the external microphone on my laptop. What are you going to do?
I mean, I'm just using my earbuds, so I hope that sounds okay.
You sound great, by the way. It sounds good.
I left my, I have a little mic, one of those Ipogee mics, but I left it in LA, and now I feel like a dummy that I forgot it there. But
so it's really easy to travel, right? You'll just come back and get the microphone, and then they'll keep it.
I'll be right back. I'll see you in like, I don't
know. Well,
15 hours
15. I guess it'd be 15 with travel times too.
with travel. I meant
PSA, yeah. But it's really important. Do you mind? Do you mind just running back and grabbing it? Are you mad? Do you mind? Oh my god! I hope I'm not a little scattered. I literally I had a guitar lesson it ended seconds before I hopped on this, and my brain feels like a sponge that has been super saturated.
Is this a new thing that you're doing, or is this something you've been doing for a while?
I guess it's about. I started taking piano and guitar about 2.5 years ago simultaneously because I wanted to start weaving some songs into my stand-up, and so I started taking the guitar on stage, and I was like, look, I'm not very good at this, which I felt you have a lot of leeway as a comedian because the suckiness of it sometimes you can lean into it, and that's fine. But during pandemic, I was like, I should really focus and try to get somewhat decent at this.
And how's it going?
It's fun. I mean, it's they're totally, obviously different experiences, but I'm trying to connect them with music theory, which has been very interesting because it's almost like trying to learn French by learning Italian first, but neither one of them is your native language. So there's a lot of like on guitar like I'm picturing a piano keyboard and trying to translate that to guitar when it comes to the notes. So it's kind of weird. Do you play anything?
No, I don't, and I wish that I did. I've tried to play the piano, and I've had to learn I've had to learn both for different jobs, and I just can't do it. My first Broadway gig was Hairspray, and I had to play a guitar in it, and I only had to play the first few chords, but there was just something about I couldn't mentally make my fingers move fast enough.
Yep.
And like the strumming was fine, but like finding that placement, I just could not. I never got comfortable with it. I never did. And the piano I felt like was a little bit of the same thing, that like I understood where it was going, and I can sing, so like I can follow along, but like I couldn't make my hands do it. I couldn't make my hands move fast enough. And some people have then, told me, they're like, well, that's why it's easier when you're a kid, and when you're an adult, like it just doesn't make as much sense, but kids pick it up really quickly. But
kids do, because their brains are forming, but also I do believe I mean, yes, I understand that there is like a neuroplasticity thing that the older you get, and we only have so much RAM, you know what I mean? And the older you get, the more experience you collect. It's like, this is not upgradable, It's like, you can't take your brain into the Apple Store. Not yet, but maybe in the next 10 to 20 years. But I do think there is also a patience thing when you're older that you identify as not having enough plasticity, which is when you're a kid, you will sit in your fucking room and learn something until you've nailed it. And as an adult, you'll work on it for 5 minutes and go, I don't have time for this. This is fucking annoying. I have to go to the store. Like you talk yourself out of it easily.
You really do. That's very true. That's very true.
But you do a lot of stuff. You do a lot of really great stuff.
I'm trying. So do you, man. I'm so happy to get to meet you.
It's really wonderful to meet you too. And I really had to rack my brain and think, wait a minute, how have Andrew and I not met yet? Considering like the comedy crossover and like the friend circle crossovers but it's somehow we've just managed. It's just like a teacup ride. Like I'm over here and you're there. We kind of see each other, but we never actually
do it. Well, now here we are.
Now here it is.
And you're in Los Angeles, yes?
I'm in Los Angeles, yes.
Very nice. I really like your ceiling.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so the ceiling. This is just quick little boring house renovation stuff. This was the basement of the house, and we put a big TV here that you can't see. We were going to put surround sound speakers in the ceiling, and they poked a hole in the ceiling to do the wiring, and they were like, I think the beams are painted in here. And so we started peeling back the ceiling, and we realized that all of these beams were hand painted. So this house was built in 1928, and we believe that this would have been like a little speakeasy room, because there's
That's
a little
so cool.
there's a little bar area over there, and so we're like, fuck it, let's just expose all the beams. So that's what we did. We found this little treasure hidden under drywall.
Good find.
I would love to pick your brain about, about a lot of things, because I love your career, because you were able to port your talents over to all these different things between theater and television, film acting, and voiceover, and video games and cartoons, which is such a great, I think, just like such a beautiful acting exercise doing voiceover. But I also, because you are also a singer and you do voiceover, I would love to sort of pick your brain about vocal fatigue, how you keep your voice going. Were you classically trained as a vocalist, and what can we just talk some good vocal cord health?
Yeah. Well, it's a very performing on stage and singing in a studio, I have found, are two very different skills. And I hadn't done a lot of singing in a studio until around the Book of Mormon time. And then we were doing the cast album, and then I got a couple more opportunities after that to do some recording. And I was like, why is this so much harder? And I think it was just a weird mental thing that I wasn't preparing for it in the same way. Coming down to even like not warming up to do it. And when I'm doing a musical, I'm very diligent about warming up every night and making sure that like I'm, ready to go when I hit the stage. And sometimes I'll just roll into those studios and be like, let's try it. And not really. So I was like, oh, I gotta remember that. I definitely have to remember that. But the nice thing is when you are in a studio, and like we do a lot of songs on Big Mouth, and I work on a handful of Disney shows that have a lot of singing in it. You don't really have to push that hard, which is real nice, because that mic is right up in your grill. So you can kind of really take your time and pull back on that. And I think because I started doing musical theater, used to think that I always had to do it in one take, that it had to be one clean take.
Yep.
And that somehow I was a failure if I didn't nail it. And I forget which producer it was that I was working with who was like, we can do this line by line. Like that's where the technology is.
Come back tomorrow and we could just do this line again.
It was like, it's okay. We can take your time with that. And the forgiving thing on stage when you're doing a musical is that I worked with this director, Jack O'Brien, who's amazing. And he said to our cast at Hairspray, he was like, now that you shouldn't always think about it like this, but no matter what goes wrong during the course of this show, as long as you all nail the finale, that's all anyone is going to remember.
What a
and the finale of Hairspray is this big, joyous, it's called You Can't Stop the Beat, and it's like really, and he was right, there's confetti cannons flying over, and it's very bright, and he was right. The show could be a disaster in the first act for whatever reason, and as long as we all agreed to do that finale correctly, that's all they remembered.
Oh my God, really what a brilliant piece of advice, because yes, that's your closer, and that's the thing that people are going to leave. And I would imagine the opposite would be true, that you could have a killer first couple acts, and if the closer's kind of mad, then people are going to be like, yeah, it was fine. It's like, yeah, but everything else was fine.
Yeah. Remember the first act? That was good. Well, I definitely felt that pressure in the Book of Mormon after I performed this number, I Believe, on the Tony Awards that year as sort of the representative of the show, because it was nominated for Best Musical. So every show gets to do one number, and I was, asked to sing the song, and I felt like there was then this added pressure that when people saw the show live, they were like, I could hear them and the audience being like, oh, this is the song. This is that song from the Tonys. And I was like, well, God damn it. It's a matinee, ma'am.
It's on a Sunday. Come on.
It might sound a little different, FYI, but thanks. Thanks for that.
I never, I never pursued theater as like a performance track, and yet I have so much respect for theater performers because I feel like it's such an incredible fertile ground for learning so many skills because it's so challenging because it feels like, especially if you're doing like off Broadway shows, you show up and I imagine, even if you're the lead, you might also have to pull the curtain. You might have to jump in and it's like you learn how to be an ensemble, not just within the cast, but also to get the production going. And then on top of that, you have to learn how to roll with the punches live. You have to learn to improv when you need to. You have to keep the performance fresh for every performance. Like there's so many skill sets that I feel like kind of make you bulletproof, sort of like just hearing you describe, I thought I had to nail every recorded vocal. And you go in probably, light years ahead of everyone else because you have this like superhero training school known as theater.
Yeah, it's true. And I think to your point, like I had I don't want to say it was rocky, but it was a colorful introduction to my profession. Just in that I was doing there was some summer stock and there was some really sort of, sad regional jobs. And so I had that experience of it wasn't showbiz in the pretty way. It was showbiz in we all got to pitch in together and we're in this together. And I never played sports as a young person, but I imagine it's what being part of the team is like, that there are certainly, times I remember doing Grease, the musical Grease, at the Westchester Broadway Dinner Theater. And we, in the middle of the fucking hand jive, a man choked on his brownie sundae, and it was not great. And we had to stop the show and, so the EMTs could come in and help this man. And while it was sad and scary and sort of funny and but we all looked at each other and we're well, now we have to go out and finish this show. And I don't know how we're going to get this audience back, but we have to figure out a way to just do it. So it was sort of the best training ground in that sense, that it wasn't, I wasn't, 22 and on some, hit television show. I was 22 and I was doing or 21 and doing not a great version of Grease.
Did you finish the show? Did you finish it?
Oh yeah. We had to go back and finish it.
Amazing.
Yeah, it happens.
But this kind of vocal challenge, and the reason that I ask is because I thought I was a pretty decent singer for a comedian in my 20s and my 30s. And then, a lot of my jobs are very talky. And I started realizing late in my 30s and early in my 40s, my voice would hit a ceiling that was never there before. And I know a lot of people who will start to hit middle age and then they'll go, yeah, I just get raspy really easy. And I thought, well, that's it. So I went to the doctor. I did not have any nodules on my throat, on my vocal cords. And I started working with a voice coach, and I realized I have been talking and singing incorrectly my entire life. And a lot of people do, but most people don't sing, so you don't notice. And the incorrect way is you think in order to get vocal power, you have to force air from you tense up your stomach and tighten up your throat to force it out, which is the worst thing you can do. And you have to learn how to open your vocal cords and basically talk and sing from the mask. As my vocal coach says, your breath becomes the song. You're allowing it to pass through. And you have to relearn how to sing and talk. And it's a really strange process. Were you trained for this, or was this something that you have always just known intuitive? It was not intuitive to me.
I kind of always knew it in theory, but I didn't figure out how to put it in practice until I was in Jersey Boys. And that's a show that's all about the four seasons, and it's four guys singing very tight harmony. And a lot of them are, songs that you would know, like Big Girls Don't Cry and Sherry and Walk Like a Man. Those are all in there. But when you actually learn it and you break it down, the harmonies are really hard to sort of, because they're so tight. So that was the first time I really had to figure out what you were describing, which is the mask thing is like singing sort of almost through your nose in some way, especially if you're trying to blend with other people. But it does. That was sort of how I figured out how to do that. And then it really came to serve me when we were doing the Book of Mormon, because even if you're tired, I remember when I was doing Hedwig on Broadway, and like, I don't know if you know that show, but that it's basically, it's like one monologue with some songs put in, and there were certain performances where the talking was harder than the singing. And I was just trying to get to a song because I was like, I know I can do that, and I know how to like navigate that. But the talking can be a real pain. And I would imagine, for a lot of what you do on stage, that's got to be quite a hazard in your profession to like, because you're like talking even with a microphone, you don't always think about how to breathe or how to hold yourself when you're speaking. And I think it's very easy to allow yourself to get tight up there.
Yeah, well, especially with comedy clubs, because they're usually the equivalent of like a PA system. So they're not like really powerful microphones that, like a really great microphone, you barely have to do anything, and it just booms your voice throughout the space. And but I know a lot of people that feel like their voices are gone and they don't understand why. And it's like, well, because no one teaches you. It's just not intuitive to think, oh, the more I relax, the more power my voice will have if I aim my voice at like the roof of my mouth and my nose, which is I wouldn't have even known how to do that without, months of training. And it's still hard because you like you said, especially when you're doing Hedwig, you probably just start to fall back on the talky bits, which you think the sound is coming from your throat, but it's not. And when you're doing these like really, you're talking about like really heavy hitter, stellar shows and performances between, Hairspray and Hedwig and Book of Mormon and Jersey Boys. And is there ever any anxiety around like I really can't have a daytime life because all of my energy needs to focus on having my voice there, my energy there for these shows, which are incredibly taxing?
Yeah. No, there was definitely times in the Book of Mormon that were hard, because I was also starting weeks after we opened. I had started working on Girls. And so I was shooting episodes of Girls during the day and then going to the Book of Mormon at night. And it was hard to, that schedule doesn't allow for a lot of extra work, but, that was just an opportunity that I certainly felt like I couldn't pass up. So they were very flexible with me, and I would work on my days off, or I would work on, but, at a certain point you just need rest. And it is not, we still tried to go out, don't get me wrong, that cast, but you do find yourself needing to sleep a lot more, than you're used to, because you're doing, 2.5 hours of aerobics on stage, and then, doing things with your voice that you probably shouldn't be doing. So I slept a lot that 1.5 years that I was doing that show. Was not the most exciting person to be around, probably. And then you figure out, like, by the time I did falsettos many years later, I don't know, you figure out not to be as precious with it, and that you do still want to have some version of a social life, and that you just have to figure out ways to do it, and where you can kind of take from things, and maybe not push as hard on certain numbers because you've got people backing you up, and also if you're working with like an ensemble, there are times where I could say to Stephanie Block, like, I'm gonna need your help today. These numbers, and she was like, got it, on it. And you do that for each other as you go about.
Is there a point where, if let's just say you're tired, or you're just not feeling great, and that, okay, for the performance tonight, I'm really going to have to, I can let people know, hey, I don't feel like I'm at 100%, but at a certain point, you're really going to have to like just dig deeper somewhere and find a reserve. Is there a moment? I guess where I'm going with this is like, even if I feel like I'm on autopilot, or I don't know how I'm going to get through a show, I know, like, well, within the first couple minutes, I know that if I can just get myself onto the stage, that my kind of like reflexive performance thing will take over,
Yeah.
and the adrenaline
Yeah.
will kick in, and then I'll be okay. Do you have sort of like, are there activation points for you where it's like, if I can just get to this, I think my body will, muscle memory kick in?
We'll know what to do. Yeah. Oh, certainly. Yeah. And there is, they call it on Broadway, they call it Dr. Footlights, that like there is a healing property of the adrenaline of being in front of 1,200, paying customers, that your body does sort of go into some sort of shock. And it's like, oh God, do the thing. But I remember doing the Book of Mormon and coming out and singing a few songs, but then getting to sort of my first solo. It's a duet with Josh, and I just couldn't, there's not sound coming out. There just wasn't sound coming out. And I refuse, the stage manager was in the wings, and I came off and she was like, we can stop the show and you can call out and we'll just put the understudy on. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. And, this is 3 songs into the show. So I just continued to plow through, and the audience could tell something was not right. But then we got to, I believe, which was, my character's big number. And what you're describing, like something kicked in and I nailed it. I nailed that song that night. And the audience was like just blown away that like, how did he do it? Like, it sounded like he was dying 10 minutes ago, and now he's just sung the song. And then I was just cashed for the rest of the show. I could barely speak and was just trying, but like I had given it my all, and I was like, I just got to get through this one. And I did some very strange vocal manipulation to get through that show, like singing things down an octave or speaking things. And the whole cast was like horrified and laughing about it. But it was a fond memory of also, you can push yourself, but then I had to miss like 3 shows after that and like take a bunch of steroids because they were like, your vocal cords are garbage right now, kid. Take it easy.
Well, and those are also, I imagine, the shows that obviously we appreciate the shows where everything goes fine. Well, but those are the shows that you really remember. And those are the character building shows too, because what an incredible lesson in just like, I just gotta, I'm just gonna have to do it. It's gonna be weird, and that's just gonna have to be okay. That you didn't
humility,
yeah,
not great.
And when you're on Broadway and you start auditioning for television and film, is there a plan overall in the back of your head where you're saying like, I don't want to get too far away from theater, or like, I want to have a nice balance, or like when you think about the entirety of your career and all the things that you do, if someone were to say like, what do? You would say you're an actor, and also a director and a writer, but in your mind, how do you think of you? Like what's your home thing?
I mean, I think of myself as a theater actor, even though I have not done that in a couple years at this point. I haven't been in a Broadway show since Boys in the Band was the last time that I did that. And that was 3 years ago. So it's, but it's weird that that's how I think of myself, as like, well, you're a Broadway actor, but haven't done it in a while. But it did become very important to me very quickly. I was lucky to have some opportunities, thrown my way because of the Book of Mormon, and working on Girls and working with Ryan Murphy on The New Normal were things that came up, that specifically the New Normal, because it shot in Los Angeles. Girls was shooting in New York. So as difficult as it could be to make that work, I was able to do the first 2 seasons and stay in the Book of Mormon. So they worked around the show schedule, and I think I only ever had to miss like 1 or 2 shows the whole time.
Wow.
And that was it. But the New Normal was going to be very different because it shot in Los Angeles. So that meant leaving the show and packing up and moving. And I wasn't quite ready to do it, but the opportunity was just so great that I was like, well, I can't say no to this. But I really missed the show. I missed the Book of Mormon, and I missed doing it. And I felt like we were finally at a place where the Tonys were behind us, and we were, just sort of doing it, and it was fun and I liked doing it, but then it was time to leave. But then I remember, saying to my agents and my manager, like, I have to figure out a time and a way to come back as often as possible. So it started with Hedwig, that Neil Patrick Harris was leaving the show and they wanted to keep it running, and they weren't sure, if it was going to work, but I had 2 months before I started something else. And they were like, okay, well, do a 2-month run. So I got to go into that show and I did it for 2 months, which was really incredible to get to do that. And then that continued to run after I left. And then the next year I think was Hamilton, that I filled in at Hamilton for a few weeks. And I just I guess my point is I just made it a part of my year when I was looking at sort of what my opportunities are, to make sure that there was space in there for me to do a show. Cause it feels, it sounds cheesy, but it's just it's such a recharge for me of my battery. And it's such a good reminder. The adrenaline of performing live in front of people, and you can be doing great work on a film set and you never get that feeling. Like you don't get that same feeling.
No, you about it.
Yeah. I have done things and people say like, oh, that was good, or that was funny, or that was sad, or whatever. And you're like, thanks. And then a year later it comes out and you're like, oh yeah, that was not so bad. But it's there's nothing better than being on stage and experiencing that exact rush and having to really pull out all your tricks every night and be like, I'm leaving it all on the table, folks. Like, that's really exciting. And there's nothing that can replicate that.
No, but also a theater show, like, I would imagine, really gets just into your blood and your molecules, because I'm so interested in the journey of, first of all, you have to learn a whole show in not a lot of time, which is not just dialogue, but it's songs and choreography, and also folding in with, a group of people that you may or may not know, but you have to come together as a community to make a thing. And then you just do it over and over and over and over and over. And I'm sure it just kind of takes on a life of its own. And it's like, oh, the first couple of shows are probably different than, the 6 months of shows or a year of shows or whatever. And, are you discovering new life as you're going along in this thing? And then you go shoot a TV show or a movie, and it's like, oh, you say these lines once or twice, or depending on how much coverage you have. Yeah. You could learn it that day if you need to, if it's just 2 lines. Sure. And then you probably forget about it. It's just like it just passes through you.
Yeah. Oh, no. We would talk about, Regina Hall and I talk about on Black Monday, like, if you asked me to do a scene from the day before, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
Like, it's once we're done and we're wrapped and we're home, like, that just weirdly leaves my head. And then you're learning the next day and you learn the next pages. But if you ask, the few times that we've had to go back, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? You have to go back? I don't remember that.
I don't know what this was. What? I don't even remember any of this. What are you doing?
That was Tuesday. Are you crazy? So silly.
Well, but also, as you're doing all these things and getting all these opportunities, it's probably, would you say you're doing the things that you set out to do when you were first starting out?
Yeah, and more, quite frankly. I didn't know. I think my scope of what was possible was pretty tight, and I just thought that I wanted to work for as long as possible in theater, and I never really thought of television as something I would get to do. And then when I started to do more of that, and writing seemed like more of an option, like, that became exciting. And so it's been sort of an ever evolving, and, you constantly have to sort of check in with yourself about, like, does this make me happy? Is this something I want to be doing? And I am, really lucky that, especially early in my career with Trey Parker and with Lena and with Ryan Murphy, that I worked with folks who wrote their own material. And Lena was always incredible to me, that she, like, was writing and directing and producing and, telling stories that she wanted to tell. And it took me a while to sort of figure out what my version of that was. But then to get an opportunity to write a book was pretty amazing. And now, right now, with Modern Love, that they circled back, and because the first essay I wrote, which was a chapter, would become a chapter in this book, was in Modern Love in the New York Times, and then became a book that came out a few years ago. And they came back to me and asked me if I would consider adapting the episode, or adapting the essay into an episode, and then that turned into John Carney asking. He was like, "Well, would you consider directing it?" And it kind of, I don't know. It all felt very sort of. I mean, it took a long time, but it all felt oddly organic and sort of like I felt like I was kind of doing the right stuff all of a sudden. That I was like, "Oh, this is why this is all lined up. Is because you're gonna have this opportunity." And I don't know when the next time I'll direct is, but it felt like a very sort of complete moment to get to go back and tell that story in a different way.
Especially to direct something that you wrote, where you're not having to translate someone else's story into your vision. Like, you probably, because you wrote it, you have a very solid idea in your head of like what this is, how this plays out, how it's supposed to look. But what were you surprised by in the directing process? Because I always think of it as like, if I might say like, oh, I'm gonna draw a guy on a horse, and I have a very clear idea in my head of what that is, and my hand scrawls it onto paper, and I'm like, what is this? This isn't at all what I thought. So are you finding that with directing, or do you feel like, oh, it actually expressed visually the way that it was in my head?
A little of both. I had a really great director of photography named Yaron Orbach, who was super, super patient and very, talked me through things and answered a lot of questions and got me to think about things. Also, we were supposed to film this in March of 2020, and we did not get to film it until September. So I had a lot of time to work on this. I had a lot of time to prepare. So there were certain things that we did that came off exactly as we had talked about, and they look exactly like, the boards we had, come up with, and the pictures that I had told him, and, like we were able to do a lot of that. And then some things that were just like happy accidents on stage, that were shots that were just sort of stolen or things that, just sort of happened. We did a lot of steady cam work, and we had great actors who were able to do very long takes of pages and pages of dialogue. And we caught some really cool stuff with the steady cam that I wasn't really expecting. And I think that's when I had to loosen up on the planning and just be like, let's just see what happens. Let's just, you can always go back to that plan, but let's see if this maybe turns into something a little different. And I also, which is funny because I'm an actor, was somehow forgetting like, oh, they're going to do their own thing on the day. Like, I'm not going to be able to control everything they do.
Right.
And we had such a great time kind of finding it. But then I really enjoyed just being able to kind of sit back and be like, well, it belongs to you now. So I'm not going to white knuckle this. I'm just going to like let you're playing the part. So that was a really sort of freeing experience, that I was like, you don't have to control them. Just, they know what they're doing, and you trust them, and they're here for a reason. So let them do it.
Yeah. And also, I would imagine sometimes you can be really surprised by someone's take on something and go, oh my God, I never thought, oh wow, that's a really great, I never would have thought that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, very exciting. So my big takeaway was, if you cast it correctly, you don't have to do much work.
Yeah, you're finding a right team, but I imagine that's, like also your DP and your lighting people and the music, like everyone is just like trying to find the right team of people, and then just trusting them that they know what they're doing.
That this is going to work. Yeah, exactly.
I loved something you said like 5 minutes ago about, and then I asked myself, am I happy with what I'm doing? And because you said it very casually, but I think that's one of the most profound things to do, because as performers, we live a very like, I don't know, maybe I'll work this year, maybe, who knows, and so it can be very easy to, much in the same way that when people get older, elderly people go, it's weird, like, I know that I'm older, but I feel like I'm, 20 in my head. Much the same that as performers, we might always feel like the performers who are just starting out and just trying to, and just had to survive. So we're constantly in survival mode. But survival mode doesn't always serve you. Like, you really do have to recognize, like, you're evolving. And it's so hard sometimes, I think, to remember to stop and ask, because you'll just go, yes, I'll do this. Yes, I got to do this. No, I got to do this. No, and I got to, oh yeah, I better do that. Oh fuck, if I don't do that, I may never get another. And then, but we forget to stop and ask ourselves, am I happy doing this? Is this a healthy thing that I'm doing? How often do you
need to do this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How often do you think it's healthy to check in?
I mean, I forget for long periods of time, certainly. And then something will happen. Usually it's real life sort of catching up in some way. And then it does sort of cause you to be like, well, do I have to do that talk show right now? Or do I have to guest star in this thing that is actually going to make my life very complicated? Like, is there a way to maybe... Is it okay if I say no? Like, I have a very, really great agent named Blair Cohan and a really great manager named Christy Smith. And I remember talking to them about something years ago and being like, can I say no to this? And Blair was like, yeah, you can always say no. Like, of course, you don't have to say yes to everything, but it is that mentality that you're thinking about of like, well, work begets work and I have to keep doing everything. And it's sometimes hard to keep track of the bigger picture. But I think, if in the times that I have remembered to do that, and I feel like I do it more now, it's very helpful. It's a helpful check-in. Because, careers can be not all of them, but they can be very long and they can do lots of different things. And I think, there's a lot of ups and downs in them is what I'm trying to say. And, it's good to just remember to kind of roll with it sometimes. And you never know what's going to come up exactly. Anytime I've really tried to plan something or like vision board the hell out of a job, I don't get it. And then it's like something else that comes up that I didn't even know existed that I'm like, oh, that's what I want.
And it usually comes up when you have a vacation coming up, and you're like, "When are we gone?" 7th to 23rd. They're like, "Oh, this dream job, this thing really, they want you on August 12th," and you're like,
"Yep."
And then you have to make that decision.
I used to always think if I wanted a job, I should buy a plane ticket, and I don't know. And it was true for a long time. Like, plan a vacation, you'll get a job.
Yeah,
go for it. Yeah.
Well, I also think we kind of have this dangerous thing where we kind of celebrate working ourselves into a pile of dust. It's like, oh, that person's busy, therefore they have a lot of value, or they're cool, and it's like, I don't know, and maybe it's pandemic mindset sort of sinking in of like learning balance and like appreciating daily moments and in real life sort of things, but like, that is potentially extraordinarily unhealthy to value working yourself into the ground at the expense of your health or your mental health, or your physical health, or relationships or whatnot. And so why do you think that is? Why do you think we don't often, as I feel like culturally, don't necessarily celebrate balance as much?
I know. It's true. I think personally speaking, I think mine comes from fear of not being able to keep doing the thing that I like to do. So I'm afraid if I don't do everything, then is somebody going to be mad at me? Or am I going to like piss somebody off and they're not going to hire me for something else down the road? And how long does that last? And, so I feel like a lot of my stuff comes because I'm afraid of losing something in some way. But then I don't know. I feel like this past year past year and a half has been obviously wildly difficult on many, many levels. But that, I don't know, and I don't know if you had the same experience, but when everything just stopped, I had been going from job to job to job for like a year and change and hadn't really had any time off. And all of a sudden, the rug was pulled out from everything. And it did not feel correct or reasonable to be like, but I wanted to direct a TV show when there's a global pandemic happening. So I was like, right. Okay, just put a pin in it, Rannells. It'll happen when it happens. But it did lead to some real spiraling of all of a sudden just having to be like by myself and figure out, well, who are you if you're not working? And do you have value if you're not working? And are you interesting if you're not working? Like, what are you going to talk about? What are you going to, like, there were no parties to go to, but if there had been, like, what stories would you be telling? Are you just digging into your past and coming up with some shit? Or like, I really, it had a very, a sort of identity crisis for a while there that I was like, I don't know who I am if I don't have a job. And I think that was weirdly a lesson I had to learn in my 20s before I was really working a lot. And I figured out that, like, no, you can be an interesting person and not be on Broadway and not have those credits, and like that you still have value and don't sell yourself short. I was constantly making myself smaller around people that I felt like had more than I had. And it just didn't serve you, it doesn't ever serve you. But I feel like I had to learn that again this past year and a half, that I was like, you're still, I mean, I might not be that interesting anymore, but like, you're still a good person, Andrew, or at least you're trying. Even if you don't have a job right now, it's okay. And I had to remind myself that.
That was so eloquently put, and because just when you were talking about something like about value and, who am I and what do I, so I sort of get chills because, like, yeah, those are such the most amazing kind of existential questions that we ask, particularly as performers, because we put so much into the business and so much into each job. And even just hearing you talk about like going to parties, and it's like, you never go to an entertainment party and you don't have conversations like, so what type of mindfulness practice are you doing? It's always like, what are you working on? What sort of in the moment experiences did you appreciate today about life?
Yeah.
Did you look at a bee and think about the enormity? It's like, no, what are you working on? How's it going? Yeah. Oh, I had this experience with work. And we do place so much value, and not that it's not, I mean, it's our careers, but I think there's this really interesting place that is great to get to, that we are not our careers, and that we can do things because we like to enjoy, we enjoy them and we want to do them, but not that we need to do them to feel like we exist. And I feel like that is such a powerful question to ask. And to anyone who's not a performer, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I feel like in every profession, we do allow ourselves to be defined by our jobs and sort of forget, like, oh, but that's an external thing. And at the core of it, it's a thing I do, but it's not me, and who am I, and what do I like, and what's important, and how do I balance that out?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of different versions of it. I remember having a conversation with my mother years ago, and my younger sister was about to go to college, and she was like, I don't know who I am if I'm not a mom of 5 kids.
Right.
And she never really had a job during that time. She was always just like, and it lasted like a little too long, because my sister was, in high school and she didn't need a babysitter. She wasn't, but my mom still was like a stay-at-home mom. But after raising 5 kids, and I think that was her moment of what we were just sort of talking about, is like, well, then who am I then if I'm not that lady? Which I remember feeling I was sort of experiencing it in a different way in my 20s in New York. But like, we did connect on that level of like, well, I think we have to look at ourselves as like, obviously more than one thing, and not just define ourselves from one thing, whether that's motherhood or singing and dancing. I
mean, do you feel like, and obviously I'm not trying to pry or get personal, but do you feel like she was able to start to figure that out, and how did she figure that out? You know, were there certain questions? Was she like, oh, I want to, you know, because I've spent so much of my time like, you know, doing things for other people to kind of keep other people, you know, going. Like, what's for me? Like, what do I like to do? And, you know, did she ask some of those questions? Did she figure it out?
She did, I think. I think she did for a while. Yeah, that she did have to sort of explore, and you know, she had some different friends and was doing different things and had to create some time for herself, which I think was really hard for her to do. And I think on a certain level, it's still sort of hard for her to do sometimes, but certainly better at it now than she was 20 years ago, about being like, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to see if I like it, and I have to figure out. And I guess we have to do that too. I was asked recently sort of, you know, about like hobbies, and I was like, hobbies? Hobbies? What are you talking about? What is that? Like, I was like, I don't know, I guess my career is my hobby. And they were like, no. What, like latch hook, painting? And I was like, fuck it. I was like, I don't have fucking time for that. What are you talking about? And the fact is, I probably do have time for that. I probably could create more space to be like, I love, I don't know, miniatures or whatever the fuck. Like, I'm going to start doing calligraphy. Like, yes, I could find, and I should find something that like helps me unwind. That's not just a spiral about my career. Like, that's not a good hobby.
Andrew, do you want to direct this episode of Modern Love? I'm working on a latch hook cityscape. I don't have time to direct it, you know. But I think it is that thing of, you know, when we start out, in a way, our careers start out as hobbies, right? Because you sort of find, just like you said, well, my career is my hobby. But at a certain point, it scales up, and your career is partially not just for you anymore, because you have all of these pressures and people that either you employ or other people in an ensemble that rely on you, or you have. So it is for you, but it also becomes about a lot of other people. And so, you know, back to your earlier point about like, I took a guitar on stage when I was, you know, performing, but, you know, piano specifically was like, well, this isn't for anybody. This is just, you know, it's like that thing of like, well, I don't know, it's fun. Well, what's it for? Well, it's for fun. Like, I'm not commodifying it in any way. I'm not trying to fold it into anything. It's just because it feeds me in a way. It's like I'm just doing something for me. And I think those are the kind of existential, the existential rain gutter, I think ultimately just sort of pours into like, well, what's for me? So do you have an eye on anything that you feel like, well, I guess if I really were to think about it, I might just do this thing, you know, that's just for me?
I don't know. That's a really good question.
Maybe you're not ready to yet. Maybe you're, you know, like you don't always have to have one.
No, but I would like to find my version of the piano lesson that would be something like that. I mean, you know, I very much used to write just for myself, and they were, you know, sort of essays or short stories or things like that. But then the second that I had an inkling that maybe I could share it with more people, it takes on a whole different life.
Your brain, it's like a different mode. It activates a different part of your brain.
There's deadlines, and there's notes, and there's things like that then sort of suck a little of the joy out of it because you're like, well, now it's a thing I got to do. The second money is involved, then it's got to be something else, and you're like, oh, this is turned into something else, and it can be very exciting, and it can still be very rewarding. But I know I need to find something that would be. I don't know.
And it's also because you think about it's like then when you start factoring all that stuff in, then you can't help but think about other people's reactions, and do other people's reactions like soil the art or the experiment, because you're sort of then in a way it's like an external thing that you can't control, but you're thinking about like, well, how's this going to land, and are people going to like this, and is this funny or is it not funny? Then it. You know, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it does lose us a little bit of the purity of like, I am only doing this because it brings me joy, and I really if I never showed it to anyone, I wouldn't care. I don't think it's terrible to have a thing that's like that, so that you kind of because then you're not worrying about the external world at all. It's just like, this is just for me and something that I'm connecting with, and everything else is not relevant to this thing.
You've inspired me to find something.
It might just be the thing you riffed. You're like, I know I riff latch hook painting, but I got some carpet strands and a little canvas, and I have to say it's very creative.
I used to like doing it when I was a kid. I did a Snoopy in his doghouse, and I think it turned out great. And I might want to revisit that. I don't know.
Maybe, and who knows? Maybe you'll bring back maybe you'll create some type of latch hook movement. Like you will at a certain point.
I will say they're out there. The latch hooks. They're if you look on the Etsy or they're out there.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a community of latch hook artists right now listening, going, "What the fuck? We're right here.
Yeah,
we've been here the whole time." Making
cities
or sunsets or boats, like with those.
I want to do like a Don Knotts, just like a really sensitive latch hook of Don Knotts would be my dream.
Did you ever hear Dana Gould has a really old bit about how Don Knotts could never be like a creepy prank caller because his voice is so recognizable? No. Someone would answer the phone, he'd go, "I've been looking at you through the bedroom window. Is this Don Knotts?"
I've always loved Don Knotts. I've always loved him.
What a story that was! I often think about like what an interesting and wildly different time it would have been to be like a TV star or a film star at that time.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, 50 million people would watch one thing, but also someone like Don Knotts, I would be so curious to know if he ever sort of felt trapped by the character of Don Knotts, or if he was like, "No, this is what I did, and I'm totally comfortable. Like I'm totally at peace with just kind of doing these kinds of roles." I mean, I know he got a lot more famous playing Mr. Furley, but do you have any insight on him?
No, none at all. But I imagine, I don't know if the Jerry Lewis of it all is any indication. There's sometimes a need to sort of or a desire to sort of bust out of that mold and be like, I know this is a thing that made me famous, but now I want to play a serial killer and I want to do something very dark. And I'm sure nobody offered him that opportunity, but I wonder what he would have done if given the, some sort of wildly different chance. Like Mickey Rourke and The Wrestler. You know what I mean? No one saw that coming.
No, of course not. But also, defying expectations or maybe that idea of I want to try something for me, because I do think that stardom is its own kind of weird trapping in the sense of, well, I want to, I don't want to keep this cash cow. I want to keep it going. And there's a lot of expectations and, but maybe I do want to do this kind of wild. I mean, you see it happen all the time. It's more common now, but at least when we were growing up, if a comedian ever wanted to do a dramatic role, Robin Williams was pretty masterful at it. I always marvel at the guy who played Mork, which was one of the singularly most identifying characters of the 70s. Yeah. I'm sure people were like, no one's going to take you seriously as a dramatic actor. What are you talking about? And then somehow, just through perseverance and talent, he did it and kind of really defined his own thing. It's an incredibly impressive feat at that time.
Very much so. Yeah, because I don't think a lot of those TV actors from that time were necessarily given that chance, I would say.
Or you had to be Ron Howard and just be like, I'm going to do a totally different thing.
Yeah.
Because everyone knows me as Richie Cunningham. I'm not going to do any more acting. I'm just going to focus on directing, and then over a period of time. But I think it also is a great lesson of if those guys could do that then, when it was harder, I think what it says is, obviously any career has some lucky breaks, but it really was just about discipline and focus and pushing ahead and not listening to people when they were like, what are you doing, Ron? Ron, yeah, come on. Robin, you're Mork. What are you? It's like, no, I don't care what you say. I'm going to fucking do this anyway, regardless of how successful it is or not.
I'm sure there were some people in their lives who made that argument to them and scared the hell out of them about what's all going to go away. If you do, World According to Garp, it's all going to change. And, He did it, and there you go.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily a wildly successful movie commercially, but it did start to paint him in this other way.
Yes, absolutely. I was have you read that Mike Nichols book, Mike Nichols, that Mark Harris wrote?
No.
It's really great. It's a very comprehensive look at Mike Nichols' career, and I'm always fascinated by casting stories and how things sort of came together, how movies come together, and some of them go more in depth than others, or some of the films they talk about are a little casually, discussed about, and then I was doing Working Girl, and they're like, how?
Can you focus on that for a sec? Because that was kind of a big deal.
Can we go back to that? But the casting stories are so interesting, and it's the thing that, like, I'm afraid of as an actor, is like, what is said behind your back in those room, or in those rooms that you're not in, when you're on a list of actors and people are like, no, he's too blah blah blah, or not enough blah blah blah. Like, those are terrifying. There's also a really great podcast called The Plot Thickens that AMC produces, and every season is about a different movie, and this season is about Bonfire of the Vanities. Putting together that film. Yeah, and I forget her name, but there was a journalist who was given access to that whole process because they thought the movie was going to be such a huge hit. Mm-hmm. So she has like hours of tape and all of these notes about putting this together, and pretty incredible. But they do talk about casting Melanie Griffith's role and like how it almost went to Uma Thurman and all of the things that went into it. And it's just, it's cool to hear, but also like makes you terrified as a performer to be like, oh God, it's also fragile.
It's also fragile, and we never know, and it's like, I think you could just be as prepared as you can be, and then you kind of have to let it go to a certain extent. Bonfire of the Vanities is such an interesting one too, because on paper, it's like, guys, we're going to be billionaires after this movie, and then so it really is that thing of you just never know, and what's your motivation? And I think if your motivation is to do hit things, you might have a rocky, very potentially maybe rewarding, but also sometimes disappointing career path. But if you're driven by, this seems fun to me and interesting, and I like the people involved, and I'm just going to do it because it's fun, then again, that's like choosing yourself over your need for something, or your ego, your need for success, your need for validation, whatever. And you're literally just validating yourself with the experience in the moment. Like, it's hard to do, but if you can do it, it really just seems like, wouldn't that be a much simpler, happy path? Because then none of that other shit matters anymore.
It's true. Yes. It's very true. You're very inspiring to talk to.
Well, I appreciate that. The podcast for me has been such an incredible exploration of people that I get to talk to I go, wow, their career is really cool, or they're making so many interesting choices, or doing so many different things, and just trying to get to know them. Because you do a lot of stuff that I love voiceover, and I feel like voiceover is a thing that is not necessarily. I feel like I do believe that people respect it, but it's not like. But the Annies, the animation awards, are not like the Oscar. But it's like, But the vocal performances, like I did voiceover for a long time, and I always do a version, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But I do a version of me, or a loud version of me. But then you see these guys like D. Bradley Baker and Rob Paulson and Kevin Michael Richardson and Greg Griffin, like people who can go in and literally transform their entire persona in a moment without being able to convey any acting with their face or their body. And they just create these, and Maurice LaMarche, like just these incredible characters. And I think like that may be like one of the harder jobs in the business.
Yeah. It really is. And people who do it well are exceptional, really exceptional. I feel like, yes, I do sort of a version of myself. Although the last couple seasons of Big Mouth, I've gotten to kind of like play around a little bit more, which has been a lot of fun. But it is, that's how I started my career, was doing animation. My first jobs were all in cartoons. So it's been really nice the past few years to get to come back to that, because it does feel like something I'm very, comfortable doing. And luckily the projects have gotten a little better than when I started in, Yu-Gi-Oh.
Well, but back to your earlier point is that it's so nice to, like, there's a lot of different professions on the podcast, but it does fall heavily into performance, directing, writing, music, like that, the sort of creative arts. But and I also kind of feel like in a way we're a support group for each other, because we're all in this very similar, everyone's path is very unique, but we're all in a similar journey. And I feel like we all have a lot of the same, like, just to hear how people kind of navigate things or navigate personal happiness versus like career obligations, and reminding each other, like, well, what's important. I find I don't do these podcasts because I feel like it's a job that I have. I do it because I genuinely love learning from people and connecting with people, and so, I also appreciate that you would take the time to sit and talk and open up about these things, because I really actually do take a lot away from it. It's not a one-sided thing for me.
Well, I really appreciate you having me. It's really great to get to meet you, but also having a conversation that is so frank and so honest about these things, because they're sometimes hard to talk about, and sometimes it's hard to describe exactly what that feeling is. So I really appreciate you making the space to do that.
Well, it's also sometimes weird, like if you call up a friend and you're like, hey, let's talk about life and our choices, they might be like, I don't know.
Now? Yeah.
You can hear a baby crying in the background. Maybe now, can we just...
Yeah, no.
Jack, can we just small talk it for a bit? Is that okay? Do you mind? Is there anything else that you want to probe? Because I know Black Monday, and then obviously you directed episode 2 of Modern Love, which I'm pretty sure is August 13th.
That's correct. August 13th. Yep. Yep.
Is there anything else that you want to promote, or are you? Is there anything else you're working on, or?
I think that covers it. I am working on a second book, which I'm excited about, but that's, obviously a much slower pace. But no, I'm excited that Modern Love is finally going to be out there. It's been almost a year since we filmed it, so it's very exciting to actually get it, to be shared with people. So yeah, it's called How Do You Remember Me is the name of the episode. And I'm not sure. I think they might have changed the order of things.
Oh, okay.
At the old Amazon. Yeah. So I might be there's 8 episodes, and I think I'm number 7 of 8.
Now you're number 7. Okay, gotcha.
So yeah. So we'll see about that, but I'll get to the bottom of that.
Let's get someone on the phone right now. Amazon, can you get... I know Bezos left, but he still knows. Let's get him on the phone.
He still knows things.
Can you text him? So that's Amazon, and Black Monday is Showtime.
That's right.
And just really quickly, what is your... Do you, when you're writing a book, do you write a little... Are you one of these people that is able to just like write for like an hour or 2 a day, or do you like put it off and do it in big chunks? Like, do you kind of have to force yourself into a structure to keep up with the deadlines?
I have to put myself into a little bit of a structure. I find that if I don't write first thing in the morning, it's really hard to get back to it later in the day, as emails start to come in and things start to happen. Like, it's hard to go back to it. So I have to write for a few hours just at the beginning of the day. And that's sort of the best time to do it. Because I feel like even if I don't have anything, or feel like I don't have anything to say, as long as I get started, it might shift and go someplace else. But as long as I start, then it generally goes someplace. And it doesn't necessarily need to be like where exactly I thought I was headed. But that's how I have to do it now. It's just make myself sit down and start to write.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for your time. Oh
my gosh, thank you.
I'm a fan of your work and your career, and I'm excited to see. And maybe you'll start directing more. This could be a thing.
We'll see. Hard to say.
You never know.
Well, hopefully I'll see you when I'm back in Los Angeles.
I hope so. Thank you so much. It's great to see you. Take care.
Thank you so much.
The end. Bye.
ID10T scanning complete. Enjoy your burrito.